Hello and welcome to another Magic the Gathering draft video. It's Al here with you. This is how to draft MTG. Today I'm going to be taking you through my Kamigawa Neon Dynasty draft primer, which includes an overview of the archetypes, the mechanics, a general pick order, and an early draft strategy for the set. Before we get into it, if you could please click like and subscribe. It does help the channel a huge amount. And leave a comment if you have any questions or comments. Thanks so much for watching. Let's get to it. Okay, first let's take a look at the mechanics in Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. We're starting with Ninjutsu. Ninjutsu allows you to exchange the Ninjutsu creature with an unblocked attacking creature. This must be done after the blocker step, and you'll most likely want to do it before the damage step, so you get the damage in with the Ninjutsu creature, as many of them do trigger off of dealing damage to your opponent. But there may be some rare occasions where you want to set a stop on the damage step in Arena and activate Ninjutsu at the end of combat step. For example, if your attacking creature does more damage than your Ninjutsu creature does, you would want to have your attacking creature deal the damage, then swap in your Ninjutsu creature after. It's probably not going to come up very often, but it could. Ninjutsu will pair well with cheap creatures with Flying, Menace, and Death Touch, or with Enters the Battlefield abilities that we want to reuse. Next is Reconfigure. Creatures with Reconfigure also function as equipment. Equipment does not tap when the creature it's attached to attacks. So if that creature should die, or we decide to unattach our Reconfigure creature, we'll be left with an untapped creature to then block with. Cheap creatures with Reconfigure will be better than they look. The added modality makes them good in the late game as well as the early game. Equipping is fairly low risk, but keep in mind your opponents can kill your equipped target in response, which will waste your mana. Reconfigure will pair well with cheap creatures with Flying, Lifelink, First Strike, Double Strike, and Menace. It will also help to enable our attacking alone payoffs in red and white, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. Next is Channel. Channel allows us to discard the card at any time, instant speed, for a cost to get an effect. These are all better than they look, as they are often good early and good late. Look out for cards whose channel abilities are better than the card itself, such as Careful Cultivation and Board to Drive, as these may be underdrafted early in the format. Next is Modified. Some cards care if you control a modified creature, meaning a creature that's equipped, has an aura you control on it, or has a counter of any kind on it, not just +1/+1 counters, could be a Menace counter or a Death Touch counter or something like that. Creatures that enter the battlefield with counters on them, cheap Reconfigure cards, or cards that incidentally put counters on your creatures are great ways to enable Modified. However, I generally recommend against playing expensive cards that are strictly auras, as these carry a larger risk if your opponent can interact with your creatures. Let's look at Sagas. Sagas are enchantments that trigger an effect when you play them, and then after you draw your card on each of the following 2 turns. These effects are known as chapters. In Neon Dynasty, all the Sagas flip into creatures on their 3rd chapter. Note that the creature cannot attack that turn unless it has haste. These Sagas might be powerful with ways to return them to your hand once they are creatures, such as Ninjutsu, if you want the first 2 effects again. Finally, we have enchantment creatures and artifact creatures. These creatures also count as enchantments or artifacts, respectively, which is generally advantageous, but also makes them vulnerable to cards like Fade into Antiquity. These creatures have distinct card frames, which makes them easier to identify. These will be one of the best ways to support cards that care about enchantments or artifacts, of which there are quite a few in this set. Okay, let's have a look at the archetypes in Neon Dynasty. Here are my brief impressions of each of the 2-color archetypes in the format. We'll be trying to end up in one of these by the end of the draft. Let's start with white-blue vehicles. The signpost uncommon is Prodigy's Prototype. The vehicles version of this deck wants to use Kitsune Ace, Born to Drive, and Hotshot mechanic to crew cards like Mobilizer Mech, Imperial Recovery Unit, and the aforementioned Prodigy's Prototype. Crew 2 is an important number to be crewable by Kitsune Ace. While this strategy is mostly supported at uncommon, there looks to be a Flyers deck at common. Moth Rider Patrol, Network Disruptor, and the Modern Age pair well with Blue's ninjutsu creatures such as Moonsnare Specialist and can wield a reconfigured Acquisition Octopus or Armguard Familiar. White-black Artifacts and Enchantments is next. The signpost uncommon is Naomi Pillar of Order. White-black cares about controlling both an artifact and an enchantment at the same time. It can be built to be very aggressive with cards like Okiba Reckoner Raid, Iganjo Exemplar, and Clawing Torment, alongside payoff cards such as Michiko's Reign of Truth and Nezumi Bladeblesser. Alternatively, it can play a more controlling style, grinding out value with cards like Spirited Companion and Virus Beetle to enable payoffs like Kami of Terrible Secrets and the aforementioned Naomi. It will, however, need some strong uncommons and likely a rare or two to have a good late game. Next is White-Red Samurais and Warriors. Signpost uncommon is Asari Captain. This archetype buffs our samurai and warrior creatures when they attack alone with cards like Ancestral Katana and Imperial Subduer. Look for cheap samurais and warriors with evasion such as Moth Rider Patrol and Peerless Samurai, along with reconfigure cards like Rabbit Battery and Simian Sling to stack on top of them. This strategy works well with Red's modified payoffs like Upriser Renegade and Aki Emberkeeper. Let's look at white-green enchantments with the signpost uncommon Jukai Naturalist. This archetype cares about enchantments entering the battlefield and controlling a lot of enchantments, with payoffs like Generous Visitor, Michiko's Reign of Truth, and Sky Blessed Samurai. Cheap enchantment creatures like Spirited Companion and Fang of Shigeki are important here, and Season of Renewal gives us some late game as it can get back an enchantment, which is a creature, and then another creature, giving us 2 creatures back. This deck seems to be mostly supported at uncommon, but it seems really good, and I'm definitely going to try to draft it. Blue-Black Ninjas is next. The signpost uncommon is Silver Fur Master, a little Splinter reference for us TMNT fans, myself included. This archetype cares about the ninja and rogue creature types and enabling ninjutsu. Dokuchi Shadowwalker, Moon Circuit Hacker, and Moonsnare Specialist are nice payoffs at common. Cheap evasive creatures like Network Disruptor and Inkrise Infiltrator are excellent ways to enable ninjutsu, along with creatures we don't mind returning to our hand to recast, such as Virus Beetle. Let's look at blue-red artifacts. The signpost uncommon Enthusiastic Mechanaut. Blue-Red has a lot of different artifact synergies, including cost reduction and different enters the battlefield effects. It can play an aggressive game with cheap creatures like Simian Sling, Armguard Familiar, and Network Disruptor, supporting payoff cards such as Covert Technician, Patchwork Automaton, and Sky Swimmer Koi. A more controlling version would want to set up an early defense with cards like Automated Artificer and Moonfolk Puzzle Maker, backed up by removal, and pull ahead later with Thirst for Knowledge, Replication Specialist, and Dragonspark Reactor. There's also the potential to loop Mnemonic Sphere and Experimental Synthesizer with Heiko Yamazaki the General. Next is Blue-Green Ramp with the signpost uncommon Colossal Sky Turtle. This archetype wants to generate a lot of mana ahead of schedule with cards like Careful Cultivation and Orochi Merge Keeper to cast giant threats like Greater Tanuki and Mirror Shell Crab. Greater Tanuki is especially important as it doubles as a ramp spell itself. Season of Renewal lets us rebuy our channel cards we've used early in the game, later on in the game when we want to cast them as big creatures. This may also be the best home for a 5-color Shrines deck, although most of the ramp spells only produce green mana, so be aware of that. Black-Red Artifact Sacrifice is next. The signpost uncommon is Oni Cult Anvil. Black-Red cares about sacrificing artifacts and artifacts leaving the battlefield for any reason. They could be dying in combat or being sacrificed or returned to your hand or anything like that. This deck can play a controlling game, setting up an early defense with Automated Artificer, Searchlight Companion, and Undercity Scrounger, backed up by removal, and grinding out advantage with cards like Dockside Chef and Reckoner's Bargain. A more aggressive game plan would involve cheap artifact creatures like Patchwork Automaton, Simian Sling, and Tawashi Songshaper. The combination of Oni Cult Anvil and Sekenzen Smelter is quite nice. Next is Black-Green Aggro. Signpost uncommon is Gloom Shrieker. Black-green, as usual, doesn't have a well-supported theme here, but it looks like Gloom Shrieker wants to attack as a 2-1 menace, and it can rebuy other cheap aggressive creatures like Okiba Reckoner Raid and Coiling Stalker. So I like black-green as a low-to-the-ground aggressive deck. There may also be a more controlling strategy using Geothermal Kami to re-trigger cards like Twisted Embrace and Gloom Shrieker itself, but I'll be staying away from black-green until I see it having success. Red-green modified is last, with the Signpost uncommon, Invigorating Hot Spring. Red-green is an aggressive deck which rewards us for having modified creatures, that is, creatures with counters, equipment, or auras on them, with payoff cards such as Aki Emberkeeper and Upriser Renegade. Look for cards like Jukai Naturalist or Kappa Tech Wrecker, which enter the battlefield with counters on them already, and cheap creatures with reconfigures such as Simian Sling and Rabbit Battery. With a high enough density of enchantments, Generous Visitor can provide a lot of free modification for us. Kumano Faces Kakazan is also excellent in this deck. Okay, let's talk a little general draft strategy, how we're going to be approaching the draft as we go through. So in picks 1 to 3, we're just going to take the best card. Pretty easy. I have a general pick order coming up in just a minute, so stick around for that. Picks 4 to 8, we're going to sort of continue to take the best card, but we're going to start to form a picture of what colors are being passed to us. This is known as reading signals. For example, if we see a few solid black cards, picks 4 through 8, there's a good chance that the players to our right are not drafting black. This is known as black being open. This means we can reasonably expect to see good black cards in pack 3 as well, as those same players will be passing to us again. In picks 9 through 14, this is known as the wheel. The pack has gone all the way around the table, and we're now seeing the same pack we started with 8 fewer cards in it. These are the cards that no one at the table wanted. So if we're seeing several playable cards of one color through picks 9 through 14, it's possible that no one else at the table is drafting that color, and we should strongly consider moving in. By the end of pack 1, ideally we've identified our main color. This is the color we have the most quality cards of, or is the most open, and hopefully both. Staying as close to one color as possible will leave us with more options going forward. In packs 2 and 3, we're going to continue to take cards of our main color where possible, and then let the good cards we open or get passed determine our secondary color and our final archetype. Ignore signals in pack 2 for the most part. The packs are moving in the opposite direction, so the signals can be completely different from pack 1. It is normal to not see as many cards of our main color in pack 2, so don't panic. Pack 3 is passed to the left once again, and we will be rewarded for staying the course. All right, now what everybody came here for, let's get into the pick order. I order the picks by category, and as always, use your own judgment. If you think a card not mentioned here fits into one of these categories, go with it. I find the exercise of evaluating cards in terms of these categories is a little bit more important than the nitpicking of the exact order of the cards. Within each category, I've ordered the cards alphabetically by color. So the first thing we're going to be looking at when we open up our pack of Neon Dynasty is our rare or mythic rare. I'm not going to go over all the rares here, but if you want to check out my Reddit companion article, you can see a full list of all my picks for the best rares in the set. In general, if it looks good, it probably is good. Generally speaking, the best rares are powerful, one color, and don't cost more than 6 mana. I would not recommend first picking the rares with 4 of the same pips in their mana cost, as they are very difficult to cast. I would want to be nearly monocolored in order to be able to cast these reliably, and monocolor decks historically have not been great in Limited. After the rares, we are looking for the top uncommons and commons of the set. These have a high power level, are efficient, monocolored, and fit into multiple archetypes. These include the set's premium removal. In white, we have Banishing Slash, Fall of Lord Konda, Touch the Spirit Realm, and Selfless Samurai. In blue, we have Behold the Unspeakable. In black, Assassin's Ink and Leech Gauntlet. In red, Bronzeplate Boar, Kami's Flare, Rabbit Battery, Seismic Wave, Twin Shot Sniper, and Voltage Surge. In green, we've got Blossom Prancer, Generous Visitor, Go Shintai of Boundless Vigor, and Kappa Tech Wrecker. And finally, as a colorless card, we have Circuit Bender, which is a really nice one. You're going to put this into pretty much any deck, and it's colorless, so it doesn't commit you to a color early on. Next, we're looking for the good uncommons. These are slightly less powerful and flexible than the previous group, And I would consider these to be signals that their color or archetype is not being drafted by the players to our right if we're seeing them picks 4 and beyond. For example, a 4th pick Jukai Naturalist may indicate the players to our right are not drafting white-green. A Sky Blessed Samurai, though not white and green, would also be a white-green signal since it fits so well in that archetype and not very well elsewhere. So in white, we've got cards like Blade Blizzard Kitsune, Born to Drive, Goshintai of Shared Purpose, Hotshot Mechanic, Imperial Recovery Unit, Norika Yamazaki the Poet, and Sky Blessed Samurai. In blue, we've got Acquisition Octopus, Prosperous Thief, Replication Specialist, and Thirst for Knowledge. In black, we've got cards like Dokuchi Silencer, Goshintai of Hidden Cruelty, Gravelighter, Life of Toshiro Umezawa, and Nezumi Prowler. In red, Flame Discharge, Goshintai of Ancient Wars, Kumano Faces Kakazan, Sokenzen Smelter, Tempered in Solitude, and Upriser Renegade. In green, we've got Azusa's Many Journeys, Orochi Merge Keeper, Roaring Earth, and Web Spinner Cuff. And in this category, I've also included the multicolored signpost uncommons we discussed with the archetypes. These are Asari Captain, Colossal Sky Turtle, Enthusiastic Mechanaut, Gloom Shrieker, Invigorating Hot Spring, Jukai Naturalist, Naomi Pillar of Order, Oni Cult Anvil, Prodigy's Prototype, and Silver Fur Master. There's also a list of rares, which I consider to be sort of on the same level as these uncommons, and those are listed in the Reddit article, which is linked in the description below. Right around this time, we're also starting to look at the build-around cards from the set. We want to take these early enough to draft support for them, or late enough in the draft if we should happen to already have support for them. I would avoid taking these late in Pack 2 if I did not already have support. These are cards like Mobilizer Mech in blue, Dockside Chef in black, Dragonspark Reactor and Heiko Yamazaki in red, and in multicolored, Satsuke, The Living Lore, Satoru Umezawa, Surge Hacker Mech, and the Kami War, which you obviously need to be 5-color in order to play. In terms of colorless cards, Patchwork Automaton, which is not too hard to build around, but obviously you have to make sure that you've got some artifacts, but I think you picked this one pretty early anyways. Roadside Reliquary, which we would want to play as our 18th land. Definitely not replacing one of our 17 lands, but I think it's going to be pretty sweet if we have a artifact and enchantment at the same time. Runaway Trash Bot, similar to Patchwork Automaton, but we really, really need to have a high density of artifacts and enchantments. And then Walking Skyscraper, which cares about modified creatures. I've also included the Invoke cycle in this category of build around, as we need at least 12 mana sources of their color to cast these reliably, so we'd pretty much need to be nearly monocolored to make these work. Okay, past the top uncommons and the good uncommons, we're starting to look at top commons of each color. These are flexible and they fit into multiple archetypes. In white, these would be cards like Iganjo Exemplar, Golden Tail Disciple, Mothrider Patrol, Intercessor's Arrest, Spirited Companion, and Sunblade Samurai. In blue, cards like Armguard Familiar, Moon Circuit Hacker, Moonsnare Specialist, Network Disruptor, Sky Swimmer Koi, Tamiyo's Completion, and The Modern Age. Blue and white have a lot of good comments in this set. In black, be cards like Lethal Exploit, Mukatai Ambusher, Okiba Reckoner Raid, Twisted Embrace, and Virus Beetle. In red, Aki Emberkeeper, Ironhoof Boar, Kami's Flare, Peerless Samurai, Simian Sling, and Voltage Surge. Kami's Flare and Voltage Surge we already discussed in the top commons and uncommons of the set, but just for the sake of completeness, they're here as well. In green, we've got Careful Cultivation, Fang of Shigeki, Fade into Antiquity, Greater Tanuki, Jukai Preserver, and Master's Rebuke. And finally, as colorless cards, Ninja's Kunai and Uncharted Haven as a decent fixing land. Past these, we would want to start looking at taking the gain lands. These are the dual lands that gain you life when they come into play. We want to pick these once we're established in one color and just below the top commons. So if you don't see anything you like in the pack, and you've got you're in blue and you see the blue-white land, just grab the blue-white land. Finally, we want to pick up our role players and filler cards. I'm not going to list all of these here, but from here we're looking to take cards that put us into one of the archetypes discussed earlier in the article and fill out our deck from there. And finally, let's get into some deck building tips. Generally speaking, play 2 colors. Avoid splashing a 3rd color at all costs unless the deck is specifically designed to support multiple colors. So having some kind of mana base like 9 mountains, 5 islands, and 3 plains is pretty dangerous. So I would really recommend against doing something like that. But if you've got a few of the dual lands, or if you've got some green cards that allow you to search up lands, then we could talk about playing a 3rd color, or more maybe. I would recommend playing 17 lands, and I would recommend playing a low curve. Most limited decks want 6 or more 1 and 2 mana value creatures, and very few cards that cost 5 or more mana. So we want to be taking those 1 and 2 drops very early and save those expensive cards for later, or if you open a really broken rare or something like that. Before we close this video out, I wanted to share some pretty big news. I have recently become a father. My partner and I had a baby a little over 3 weeks ago. So you may see fewer videos from me over the next little bit as I adjust to life as a parent, but I'm going to try and still get some good content out there for you. So very exciting news. Thanks as always for watching. If you have any questions, please do leave them in the comments below. And click like and subscribe if you want to support the channel. I do appreciate it very, very much. Good luck in your drafts. We'll talk to you next time. Bye for now.